Hi, I'm Adam Blum. I'm the founder of the Gay Therapy Center. And today I want to talk to you about why are you always fighting with your partner, and why does it seem like all those fights are always about stupid things? Well, the reality is that fights, even if they're about things like toothpaste, are because tender, vulnerable feelings are being triggered. We all have them. And these feelings, if we had to put them as a question, would look like the following questions. Does he really love me? Is he really going to stick around? Does he really care about me? These are vulnerable questions, right? How do we know this about humans? Well, there's been 40 years of research done, and it's called attachment theory research. And what it has shown is that we have this built-in need to be attached to others. It's very advantageous for human beings to be attached for others, especially if you're a toddler. You know, there was some research done in Russia many years ago. They found that little kids in orphanages were dying at alarming rates, even though they had plenty of food, medicine, and shelter. They did some research and they found out that the caregivers in these orphanages weren't holding and touching the children. And that was the reason these kids were dying. Essentially, they were dying from a lack of attachment. That shows us this is a built-in need. It's as important as food and shelter. And this is some of the underlying systems that gets played out in adult love. It's good to be aware of it, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. And I think this is why relationships are so hard and yet so important. They're driven by these core needs. So what does this look like in a grown-up love? Well, let's say your partner forgot to bring home the milk even though you reminded him. Let's say the real reason that happened was because he was overwhelmed at work, stressed out, and just got spacey. However, that's not how you experienced it. You got really angry about it. Why? Well, it felt like he wasn't listening to you. It felt like he wasn't paying attention to your needs. Those are the attachment needs underlying the fight. Let's take a look at another example. Let's say your partner is yelling at you. You didn't text me to tell me you would be late. Well, what is that partner really expressing to you from an attachment perspective? I felt abandoned. I felt all alone, right? The cries of a toddler. That toddler needs to be attached. They don't even know how to open the refrigerator without their parents. So these are pretty important issues. It's life or death for human beings at a young age. We bring them into adult love. So what are we going to do with all this in our grown-up relationships? How does this help us? Well, I want you to start looking at your relationship through this lens of attachment theory. It's going to soften some of those rough edges and avoid some of your fights. So when you're mad at your partner, he pisses you off, I want you to first ask yourself the question, is it true that he's the enemy? Is it true that he's trying to do evil here? Of course, the answer is always no, or should mostly be no. That'll give you a little break, a little time then to say, okay, what's really happening? And then you can search for those attachment needs within you. Let me give you an example. Not far ago, my partner was driving the car. I was the passenger. I told him to turn left, and he turned right. And I was enraged by this. So because I had been studying attachment theory, I asked myself, well, what's going on? Why am I so mad about such a silly little thing? So I searched for the attachment triggers, and I realized, oh, well, it felt like he wasn't listening to me just now. Well, what's wrong with that? Well, when you think about it, when you feel like someone's not listening to you, it's easy to feel like they really don't care about you or they really don't love you. Now, is it true that my husband doesn't love me? No, that's not true, and that is something I know. So I was able to come back to that truth in that moment, and rather than yell back at him and get really bitchy, I was able to save the evening and let it go. I want you to try this kind of thing at home with your partner. Because typically when your partner does that annoying thing that he does all the time, it's really not about you, right? When he does that, it's typically about some of his own vulnerable feelings, like fear, or overwhelm, or being hungry, or tired, or anxiety, or fears that you don't love him. That's what those annoying behaviors are really about. So if we look at it through that lens, we can be a little softer. And the next time he gives you major attitude about something, you can say to yourself, oh, I bet he feels like I don't love him right now. Imagine if you were able to do that. Then you'd have some empathy for him. You know what that feels like. You know what it feels like to feel abandoned sometimes. You'd be less likely to fight back and to escalate and to create a big fight. And if you really remembered, oh, he probably just feels insecure about me loving him right now. Because that's what's true, that's what's really happening. Now, we're not empathy machines. We can't always empathize with all of our partner's attachment problems, attachment fears. That's not realistic. However, I think we can resolve our conflicts more quickly and more often if we think about what's happening between us from this attachment perspective and start talking about it from that perspective with our partner. You know, the conversations get so much deeper and so much more interesting if we start to talk about how we feel dropped emotionally by our partners, rather than staying exclusively focused on the dirty dishes in the sink and the crime of those dirty dishes. Think about it.